Ron, I'm a big fan of your radio show, The Soul of Enterprise. I particularly enjoyed the 100th episode that you had just recently. And one of the things I liked is yourself and your co-host, Ed Kless, really just pulled out your reflections on those episodes and particularly those guests that you found most engaging. What are the ones that, in your minds, either changed your view on things or had the biggest reaction from your listeners?
Well, for me it was George Gilder because he's my ultimate mentor, so to have him on was fantastic. But Deirdre McCloskey has had substantial impact.
So I think Deirdre was your first
guest. Yeah.
And how did you manage to persuade her to come on the show if there was no prior episodes that you could demonstrate that you were a credible?
Ed had a connection through his network that had a brother who wrote a book with Deirdre McCloskey, and so that's how we got to her.
And what's her work? Why do you respect her work so?
Because she's all about linguistics and communication, and she actually makes an argument in her series of books that the Industrial Revolution happened not because of material things, oil, technology, property rights, law. It was because of language, the most human of all things. Now that is an incredibly powerful argument, that you can sit there and say the Industrial Revolution was caused because we finally gave respect and dignity to entrepreneurs, merchants, and business people.
And I think from my read on the work that she's done, it's about the importance of ideas.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you seen that manifest in other guests that you've talked to?
Yeah, George Gilder, Rabbi Lapin, Father Sirico, all of these people talk about the importance of ideas. You know, there's no good way to implement a bad idea, right? So no matter how good or how bad, if you've got a bad idea, I don't care how perfect your execution is, it's going to have a terrible outcome.
And how did Gilder become your ultimate mentor?
Wow, my dad was a barber, and so he was an avid reader of Playboy in the barber shop, as you can imagine. And in 1981, Playboy interviewed George Gilder, and my dad read it and said, "You need to read this guy's book." His new book was passed around by President Reagan to his cabinet. Reagan read it after he was shot, and was so impressed with it he gave it to every member of his cabinet. And I told my dad, "Dad, there's a lot of crackpot economists, and I don't need to read that."
And were you already a CPA at that point?
No, I was in college.
Yeah.
And my dad persisted, and he went away, and he came back over the weekend. He threw the book at me. He said, "Read it." And I sat down on a couch, and I read the thing in one setting. My life's never been the same. One book turned my entire worldview upside down.
And it's interesting. So your dad must have been a very open-minded person.
Very much
but
so.
Being a barber, you wouldn't necessarily expect that he would be engaged in the broad range of content that's in Playboy. So what do you think it was in Gilder's work that engaged your dad and made him realise how important it would be for you?
I think the fact that Gilder's an amateur, so he can explain very difficult things in ways people can understand. Plus, my dad was innovative in his own right. Believe it or not, the barbers had their own disruption with the Beatles. The Beatles killed barbers' incomes around the country.
Why was that?
Long hair.
Okay.
Go to the barber field,
yeah.
right?
Short back and sides was not.
And so my dad actually realized very quickly in the late '60s that barbers needed to bring women in the shop, offer chemical services, coloring, perms, retail. He opened up the first unisex salon north of the Golden Gate Bridge in 1971.
Wow. And then how was it for you when you had Gilder sitting with you talking about and exploring ideas for a whole hour? Was it one of those experiences where you just didn't have enough time to ask him all the things you would love to?
Yeah, he was actually sitting on a train commuting somewhere, so we did it over his cell phone. But I've met him several times in person, and he's a genius. There's no other word for it. He's a genius.
And of his works, what would be the one that you would recommend to people?
His latest, Knowledge and Power and The Scandal of Money.
Okay.
I think they're Nobel Prize worthy books.
And clearly your show is not a religious show, but there has been a theme of people, as you say, like Rabbi Lapin and others. What's attracted you to the ideas that they bring to the show?
I guess because we call ourselves the Soul of Enterprise, the whole theme is that there's a spiritual side to business. It's not just about money and materiality and material things. It's about relationships and spiritual things meaning you can't measure them. And so some guests like Rabbi Lapin, Father Sirico, they really are good at articulating that message.
And in terms of your audience, what does that look like?
It's a broad range. We're in something like 100 countries, and we get, I would imagine there's a lot of professionals, because I hear from a lot of lawyers, accountants, and IT people. We get lots of different types of feedback in various ways. They're very committed, because they'll actually take us to task if we say something wrong or misquote something. They're very, I would say they're very educated from what I've been able to gather.
And has it been a surprise to you how successful it's been?
Yeah, it has been. Just two guys doing a podcast or a radio show. Wow. Yeah.
But I think it speaks to a yearning for an understanding of how the world is changing, but then B, also just how amazing technology is in enabling a message to get out without it needing to be highly sanitised by a big corporate to stream it through.
Right, we've got no editors, there's no gatekeeper. We can say whatever we want. So yeah, it gives us a lot of freedom.
I love the show. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it.